Hola, comrades. Today's topic of interest, Final Fantasy X. I'm excited about this for many reasons, some of which I'll get into during the episode. It's my favorite game of all time and one of my favorite pieces of art ever made, and, best of all, my ending piece, Tsutoki Dane, will no longer be inappropriate. Hurrah! But speaking seriously, this is a game that deserves more respect than it receives for a number of its triumphs, such as story structure, characterization, dialogue, plot writing, world building, and much more.
Listen to my story. This may be our last chance.
But what we're talking about today is how it realistically and poignantly creates a dark, twisted, doomed world. Final Fantasy X takes place in Spira, a land of darkness and despair. This is not rare for a modern work, but what sets Spira apart from far too many other bleak worlds is that the darkness here is actually meaningful. It makes sense, and it serves a purpose. Too often, doomed worlds are either hopelessly bleak, or they fail to pack much of a punch. The latter is especially common these days. What I'm talking about is adolescent edgelord Batman v Superman darkness. Darkness for the sake of being cool. Darkness doesn't make your work good, or even more mature. It just gives you the opportunity to explore bleaker themes with more broken characters. Forgetting that, and using the darkness as the point, is nothing more than an empty aesthetic choice, and a distracting one at that. As for the hopelessly bleak option, that's fine if you commit to it and build a storyline around it. This should be a storyline about how the world on a whole is doomed, but there is still something to be found in the personal connection between two people who care for each other, like in The Road or The Last of Us. But too many writers build this hopelessly bleak world and then try to work it into the kind of storyline that involves the hero emerging victorious and triumphant and saving everything in the end. The Lion King is my favorite Disney movie, but it's a good example to use for this. When Scar takes over, the Pride Lands turn into a wasteland. You can argue this has to do with his poor leadership, but the Lionesses outright say that there isn't any food, and the Pride Lands look like they've been hit by a drought. This should continue after Simba takes power, but it doesn't. When Scar's defeated, the rains hit, and the lands become lush and green again. Why? However, in Final Fantasy X, the enemy is able to be named, yet is so hopelessly woven into the fabric of Spiran society that it seems undefeatable. It has been 1,000 years since the end of the Great Machina War and the creation of Sin, and 1,000 years is a long time. Think what was going on 1,000 years ago in our world. That would be the year 1017. To put that into context, Pope Urban II would not launch the First Crusade until the year 1095. We are centuries away from the Renaissance. The Byzantine Empire still existed, even though it wasn't much of an empire at this point. The fall of the Western Roman Empire was only 600 years ago, and the start of the Industrial Revolution was more than 600 years in the future. If a giant beast had been ravaging the world for that long, stories of its destruction passing from parents to children for centuries upon centuries, hope that it would be forever banished would be very sparse. Spira is very much a post-apocalyptic world. That may not be obvious at first because unlike many other post-apocalyptic worlds, which regardless of their quality and intrigue are typically brown, rural, and cultureless, Spira has a distinct personality. The very idea of the apocalypse is written into the ethos of the world. This is hard to pull off and easy to make overwrought. FF10 manages to thread the needle by tying the atmosphere into the plot. It's called tonal consistency. What great fantasy works, especially those from the East, are able to do is connect the bigger picture of the world with the intimate relationship you have with the characters. In the case of Final Fantasy X, this is done through the theme of death. While death is a fairly common theme in works sophisticated enough to have actual developed themes, it was even a major theme in the greatest artistic phenomenon of my lifetime, the Harry Potter series. FF10 tackles it with cold intensity. Death isn't merely something that happens to you in Spira. It's not even like in other post-apocalyptic worlds, where death is common and can strike at any time. In FF10, death is the driving fuel of the world. There are generally two ways to focus on a story. By far the more common strategy is to focus primarily on the concerns of individuals and the relationships between those individuals. The second is rarer. There's still the focus on individuals, but it's individuals as they react to the systems in place and the conditions that arise because of those systems. These stories typically take a longer period of time to draw out, but if done right, they can be unbelievably sharp and cutting. The Wire is a great example of this type of storytelling, but because it's grounded so heavily in reality, it can only go so far. Final Fantasy X, I believe, also fits into the second type of storytelling. Spira is a dark world, but it's not dark in the normal way. This is less 28 Days Later and more Children of Men, more about an authoritarian system thrown up in response to horrible panic and dismay. This isn't fun darkness. There are no vampires or ravens or abandoned castles. A goth would not have fun with this. This is dark in an existential, nihilistic way. As in, the world is doomed, the world has always been doomed, the world will always be doomed, and you'd have to be foolish to try to change that. How could it be anything else when death is so central to Spira? As Aaron says,
the spiral of death.
Huh?
Summoners challenge the bringer of death, sin, and die doing so. Guardians give their lives to protect their summoner. The Faith are the souls of the dead. Even the maesters of Yevon are unsent. Spira is full of death. Only sin is reborn, and then only to bring more death. It is a cycle of death, spiraling endlessly.
From the revelations at Yuna's trial to Yunalesca's speech late in the game, the whole of Spira is consumed by death. But it also factors heavily into the personal narrative of the story. For 2/3 of the game, you think you're going on a standard fantasy journey, more or less. You drop the ring into Mount Doom and have the Eagles fly you back, and incite a mass panic among your more obdurate fans who complain that the Eagles could have just flown the Fellowship to Mount Doom in the first place, instead of taking a step back and wondering why exactly that wouldn't have been possible. Got a little off track, but whatever. My point is that FF10 looks to be a standard, if unusually interesting and mysterious journey, until Tidus learns that his conception of their journey is false. Yuna is on a mission to defeat Sin, yes, but at the end of the mission isn't parades and rainbows and happiness, it's death. See this emotional scene.
The pilgrimages have to stop. If they don't, and they get to Xanarkand, they might defeat Sin. Uni could... but then she... Uni will die, you know? You know, don't you? Summoner's journey to get the final Aeon. Yuna told you, didn't she? With the final Aeon, she can beat Sin. But then, if she calls it, then the final Aeon's gonna kill her. Even if she defeats Sin, it will kill Uni too, you know?
Was I the only one who didn't know?
Tell me why. Why were you hiding it? Why didn't I know?
We weren't hiding it.
It was just
Too hard to say.
Lulu! How could you? How could you? Isn't she like a sister to you? I thought you were family. Why don't you do something, Waka?
Don't you think we tried to stop her? She follows her heart.
She knew what she was doing when she chose to become a summoner. To face sin, yeah? Yuna knew.
But Waka, that's just totally wrong. Summoners shouldn't have to sacrifice themselves. Just so the rest of Spirit can be happy, right?
But that is our choice.
We all live in fear of sin, you know that.
A world without sin. That is the dream of all Yevon's children. And we will use that power even if it means our lives.
And I've been telling Yuna, let's go to Xanarkand together. Let's beat Sin. I told her all the things. We could. And all along, the whole time, I didn't know anything. But Yuna, she'd just smile.
She's going to die at Xanarkand at the end of the journey to bring peace to the world, except that peace won't last forever. Sin always comes back. Yuna hopes that one day it will be defeated, but when she realizes that's not possible, she breaks down as well. It's not just that Spira is controlled by the force of death, it's that the death is mostly pointless. Heavy casualties during war are terrible, but you suffer them if you believe that your cause is just. But this pointless sacrifice, however logically justified it may seem, is soul-draining. That same spirit of pointless sacrifice sends Tidus and Yuna into a state of profound confusion, which leads to the Suteki Dane scene at Macalania Woods, which is not only rapturously romantic, but also vitally important. They're not just sharing a kiss. In this moment of intimate connection, Tidus is able to not only drag himself from the abyss, but also save Yuna by helping her create a fiery light, a light they share, a light that allows her to go on, a light that is her breaking free of the shackles of her lie-filled past and forming her new identity. I could go on and on about this one scene. Last year I wrote a 10,000-word essay about it that you'll find linked in the description. I could describe it, the scene, not my essay, of course, as life-changing, but even that wouldn't be doing it justice. Whenever I watch it, I feel like I don't have a right to, like I'm intruding on something too powerful for anyone besides Tidus and Yuna to understand. But enough gushing. This scene works because it's the ultimate subversion of the deathly sorrow that hangs over Spira. It's the light in the darkness. You've been attacked by the calloused culture of Spira on two scales, the grand and the personal. But this is when it changes. There's no deus ex machina, no magical shift, no divine weapon, just two people bonding over trauma, laying down their burdens, getting excited over a future they know will never come to pass, and saving one another. Just a soft, sweet moment shared between two young lovers, and the entire mood changes. Final Fantasy X strikes that rarest of tones, working in the gray area between typical heroic fantasy and gray, gritty, after-the-end fiction. Society can be redeemed in Final Fantasy X, and the darkness can be vanquished, but not without the perfect conditions and a Herculean effort. In many other dystopian works involving tyrannical governments, the question often lingers at the back of your head, why wasn't there a rebellion before? How has this system stayed in place for so long? Take the Hunger Games. The books are great, and the movies are even better. But I asked myself more than once how a regime that sacrifices teenagers on a regular basis has survived for so long. It's far from the worst offender, which for the record would be Divergent, and I can imagine Pan Am existing, but it's a good contrast to Final Fantasy X, which presents the issue front and center. This is done through the character of Tidus, who is an outsider to Spira, being from Dream Zanarkand, and thus has no hesitation to question every belief and custom of this new land he has found himself in. His lack of knowledge about the world becomes a source of drama. One scene in particular comes to mind. Early in the game, as Yuna and her guardians travel the Mihen High Road, Tidus learns about how Sin always comes back. He's flustered, and Yuna can tell, prompting this.
If it just comes back...
Don't say it isn't worth it. Because it is.
Even for a little while, people can sleep in their beds without being afraid. That kind of time is worth anything. Don't say it isn't worth it. Your words that day, Yuna, I remember them well.
Summoners are sacrificed so the people of Spira can continue to live their lives normally. It's viewed as a noble cause. Sin may never go away, but there is hope and belief that someday, somehow, it will be gone. Hope and belief. These are what drive Spira, allowing it to cope with the tragedy of the world. As Yunalesca says in her speech,
Yevon's teachings and the final summoning give the people of Spira hope. Without hope, they would drown in their sorrow.
This hope is maintained through the Church of Yevon, which is insanely corrupt but also made sympathetic by the darkness at Spira's heart. FF10 is far from the first Japanese game to deal with religion. The evil church is practically a cliche in RPGs, and if you've played as many Tales games as I have, you're likely tired of it even if you have no affinity for a religion. But FF10 is different. The religion is not evil, not in the cackling, mustache-twirling sense. It's antagonistic, yes, and it's built on lies, but those involved genuinely believe that without Yevon, the world would collapse into despair, and were it not for the bravery of your party, they would be right. The cycle of death is terrible, but it has been the only way to keep Sin at bay. Everything else has failed, including Operation Mihen, which you see earlier in the game. If it weren't for Auron, who has seen the truth and struggled on after death to take down the cruel system that claimed his two best friends, and if it weren't for the unique situations of Tidus and Yuna being the children of a former Guardian and Summoner, respectively, if it weren't for all that and a billion other little things, you would have failed. Final Fantasy X isn't just using a church as a great evil, like many lesser RPGs. It's actually offering an insightful, complex commentary on religion. Two of the characters in your party have a strong connection with Yevon. Wakka is a devout follower to the point of fanaticism, and Auron was a Yevonite priest before refusing an arranged marriage and being disgraced. If he had gone along with Yevon's wishes, he would have held Kinect's high post in the church. Auron has come to his revelation before the start of the game. Wakka comes to a similar revelation during the confrontation with Yunalesca. Every character has to confront the darkness within themselves if they are to confront the darkness within the world. Without confronting this personal darkness, they wouldn't be strong enough. What makes this world so dark, aside from the amount of time it has been dominated by sin, aside from the continued sacrifice of summoners and their guardians, aside from its post-apocalyptic nature, aside from the theme of death being threaded through the entire world, is how the apocalyptic event keeps coming back. Even in the darkest post-apocalyptic fiction, there's this glimmer of hope that maybe one day, somehow, things will go back to the way they were. But in FF10, that's not possible. Every time a city gets too big, every time, sin destroys it. Progress is just a distant dream for the people of Spira. The loop has been impossible to break in the past. No summoner has been motivated enough, strong enough, disillusioned enough to do the impossible. No one until Yuna. Once a shy girl resigned to her own fate, proud to follow in her father's footsteps, she has wrested control over her destiny, leading to this memorable exchange with Yunalesca, the woman for which she was named.
No one. I would have gladly died. I live for the people of Spira, and would have gladly died for them, but no more. The final summoning is a false tradition that should be thrown away.
No, it is our only hope. Your father sacrificed himself to give that hope to the people, so they would forget sorrow.
Wrong. My father wanted to make Spiro's sorrow go away, not just cover it up with lies.
Sorrow cannot be abolished. It is meaningless to try.
My father, I loved him. So I will live with my sorrow. I will live my own life. I will defeat sorrow in his place. I will stand my ground and be strong. I don't know when it will be, but someday I will conquer it. And I will do it without false hope.
Like many in the millennium since the Great Machina War, Yunalesca believes the final summoning, this broken tradition built atop a pile of lies, is the only way to stop sin, to stop sorrow from consuming Spira, to give its citizens a glimmer of hope. But what good is hope without truth? The party asks, and they fight for a better world. In most dark works, the darkness is accepted, and it becomes easier to bear. But in Final Fantasy X, the darkness is fought, and so its full weight crashes down on the likes of Tidus and Yuna and Auron. But they proceed anyway, whatever the consequences. As Auron says in the game's most seminal quote, as they prepare to fight Yunalesca,
"Now! This is it! Now is the time to choose. Die and be free of pain, or live and fight your sorrow. Now is the time to shape your stories. Your fate is in your hands."
That's not the voice of a man willing to accept his fate. I honestly don't have much to say here. I just love Final Fantasy X so very much. Seriously, I could do 100 different videos on this game and never get bored. Anyway, if you liked what you saw today, consider donating to my Patreon so I can produce more amazing content. And also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that poignant stuff. Adios, comrades! Oh, and I suppose I should mention why this video is coming out when it is. I release videos on Saturday, and 3 days after the Saturday on which this video will be released is my birthday. This will be the last video I publish as a 17-year-old. That was only appropriate, I figured, considering that this is my favorite game ever, and both Tidus and Yuna are 17. Privately, I've called this year my Tidus and Yuna year, which is slightly dorky, I know, but it's the truth. I've faced a lot of challenges this year, and the world's been crazy. But like Tidus and Yuna, I've tried to carve out a new identity for myself against the darkness. And I've done a lot this year, grown a lot as a person. Starting this time last year, I made it my mission to enrich my identity as much as I could before I turned 18. And I think I've succeeded. I've made the protagonists of this beloved game of mine proud. I better stop before this turns from significantly embarrassing to completely embarrassing. But I love this game, and I love all of you who've stuck with me since April, and all of you who've come aboard since, when I started this channel as a part of those 17-year-old ambitions. And I'll say this: wherever you are, whoever you are, pursue wisdom and truth, develop a love for learning, and you'll be alright. Trust me.